Welcome back to the podcast for exceptional people. I am actually not your host, but today I am. I am so excited to be here and interview Will, who started this show. So I am Cara Tyrrell, and I met you when we were both put together for the Council for Exceptional Children's event in Baltimore as part of a teacher slam. First time we'd ever met, and we both raised our hands and said, sure, we'll co-chair together. And this podcast was kind of a natural evolution from your passion for that topic. Can you tell us more?
It was. Cara, thank you, first of all, for hosting. The idea for the podcast came from our similar interest in trauma-informed care and what we were talking about as a teacher slam, and that really igniting the idea of conversations around this conference. And when you left San Antonio, it was like we made all these great connections that sort of fizzle out. And nobody's fault. The idea was to extend those conversations around our trauma-informed care and what we were talking about in the teacher slam. And now it's just really focusing in on that and still focusing in on the emotional intelligence or the cognitive load and what we do as teachers and administrators. But the audience that I've reached has just been incredible. Teachers, coaches, administrators. It's been really fun. So it's really cool to see it keep going.
Well, it's a huge lift. So we all need to give you a little bit of a round of applause because getting ready to go to an event, making sure that you have what you need in order to get in front of a crowd and inspire, and starting a podcast at the same time, big lift. So well done. It's clear how much you care. And you just mentioned that this was your second conference, that you went to Texas last year and went to Baltimore this year. What is so special about the Council for Exceptional Children that really resonates with you as a place to go spend time and space with other educators?
I'm glad you asked that. And I want to start by saying this isn't necessarily a knock on all the other conferences I've been to, but at the Council for Exceptional Children conference last year and this year, it's just clear that people are there to really talk about what they're doing, to advance the work that they're doing, or perhaps learn and inform the work that they're doing from somebody else. People are there job hunting. There are vendors, of course, because it is a national, it is a huge event. So there are people there and they're there to assist. They're there to teach. They're there to learn from us just as much as they are to vend anything. And so it really is about the conversations from this conference and about coming away, not necessarily with, okay, here's a list of professional development I might do with my staff next year, or here are these connections I made professionally. It's more like, these were some really great ideas that I can't wait to take back. And I'm also going to make sure that I follow up with those three people in Oregon and New York because they wanted to learn from me too. So I got that from the CDC conference more than any others.
I totally agree with you. I came home and somebody asked me, oh, did you get a lot of contracts out of it? And I said, no. And that was not the point. The point was this core, I mean, for the thousands of people that were walking around, right? This core small group of people that connected in such a deep way around the work that we are going to continue inspiring each other to do better work. So I totally agree with you. I heard, so what I love about the name of your podcast is that it's kind of this extension, this extrapolation of the idea that every child is exceptional, but so is every person. And the people doing the educating need to be included under that umbrella. So, what type of educators or what type of influential thinkers are you hoping to bring on to the show as it grows?
That's a great question. I have a bucket list of some people that I'd like to talk to that really, as far as the educators and the conversations that I want to have, it really is everybody. It could go down as small as an audience. One audience that I heard the loudest voice of at CDC this year is from paraeducators and about how we have, and I say we because I am an administrator. I'm a K-8 administrator at a public school. We do ask a ton for our para administrators and our para educators, and we tell them all the time, well, your work is so valuable. That, you're called an unsung hero, but we need to start respecting them professionally, and we need to start hearing their voice professionally as well, because they're not para educators in the sense that they're on the fringe. They are very much on the front lines. But I think it's more just anybody who has the potential to create action in our world of education. It could be an administrator, it could be a teacher, it could be a coach. But it's the idea of taking professional development away from things that somebody wants to teach me to things that we want to go practice together.
Yeah. And in Baltimore, you shared eloquently about this gap in that space and how emotional intelligence isn't something that we want preached at us. We want tools around it so that we can do better as we engage with our coworkers and our students. Can you just tell us briefly about this gap? Because I was struck by what you said, and I consider myself a highly emotionally intelligent person. And also, when I provide professional development, maybe I am talking at instead of inspiring to do. And it helped me become a better presenter.
Yeah. And I think emotional intelligence and cognitive load and those things is really sort of a no fault scenario. It's just that this is from the environments that I've been in too, and pretty difficult environments to work in and to keep retain teaching, all of that stuff in the difficult teaching environments. There's enough people coming in for the X's and O's and teaching us how to teach math and how to teach science and how to read data and what data to collect and when to collect it and all of those conversations. So it's kind of in your face in those environments that the emotional side isn't really what we're here to prioritize. I don't need you to report the emotional state of your staff at the end of the year. I need you to report data. And so some places it's in your face, and then other places you can just see it. You know, you can see the disconnect in the staff. You can see the burnout and the sharpness of conversations with students or conversations that are missed with students or with colleagues. So it's sort of a no fault in that I think administrators have gotten wrapped up in this bubble of things that I have to report. And the people that are coming in are the academic coaches and the academic school improvement teams or, DOSI teams or whatever your division calls them. They're not coming in to talk about happiness and whether or not you created space for your teachers to reduce their cognitive load. They're coming in to figure out what your quarter 3 science data was. And so the gap exists because of the jobs that we do. Teachers, their first face is with students and with parents, and is that emotional response at all times and a highly charged, many questions coming at you all the time. Whereas administrators, my first face oftentimes is the data and the other person. So the gap just exists. And that's where we need to get away from, administrators being told what to teach in these PD sessions to
Absolutely. It's really interesting because you are that early childhood space that starts at kindergarten, and that's where you currently practice and support the people who you work with. And I represent that birth to 5 years old space. So, like leading up to where you take over. And down in the birth to five space, we say all the time that unless all the people involved are emotionally regulated, there is no opportunity for learning skill. And I'm hearing you talk about how that emotional regulation falls away in spades when all these other pressures are put on. And so, those learning opportunities, the ability for the brain to really absorb the information and make sense of it, it gets harder. So I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing to, on your own time, research this and come up with a way where we can close that gap, kind of the human connection piece, so that that cognitive learning can evolve. And that is how we're going to move education forward.
I think so. And it's somewhat hard, but pretty simple to wrap your head around when you think about cognitive load and those things that we deal with in that what we're asking teachers to teach and how we're asking them to teach it, the pace with which we're asking them to teach it is actually crippling the effectiveness with which they teach. Um,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
so difficult to do in practice because, we've all got our check sheets, but it's critically important.
And we all have real lives too. So that's how I really want to wrap this up by congratulating you once again on your relatively new status as a dad. You
The
have,
bottles behind me, are they there?
they're a dead giveaway. Right. So you have a kiddo who at this point must be almost 9 months old.
She's 9 months old. That's right.
9 months old. And I almost wore my parents as teachers shirt for this interview because I really wanted to point out that, yes, teachers are teachers, but so are parents. And parents are teachers from the day their child comes home with them from the hospital. So, can you share with us, like, your number one aha moment from parenting that helped you understand that you're filling the same role for your daughter that you do for these students?
Yeah. And, it was an aha moment that was, I'm really glad you asked that. It was one that was actually kind of difficult because, I've been in education for 20 years, and pretty kind of split half and half between teaching and administration. And it was sort of one of those things where I assumed that I knew how to talk to teachers. I assumed that I knew how to impart knowledge to teachers and give them space to talk and give them space to process. I had relative success. I think I've had good conversations with people, and it's just something that I thought I knew how to do, just the same as I thought I knew how to talk to human beings, just in general, my wife, my friends, and things like that. But when you bring a human being into the world that is only 10 pounds and doesn't really know how to talk yet, I had to learn that there's a whole nother world of communication that I know nothing about. And you happened to come into my world at that time because that's where you and I started and where you live is there's nonverbal communications. And so my aha moment was, I don't know what conversations to have with my baby girl and how to give her space and how to process the things that we have to process together any more than I do my teachers anymore. Because I have lost a little bit. There is something to be said for not being in a classroom every day for 10 years. So that was my aha moment was, wow, I need to do a lot more listening to my teachers because also it's much more pleasant to listen to my teachers. They're typically not screaming at me at like 3 a.m. from the top of the stairs. But that was my moment was to listen more.
Mm, I love it. Yeah, so, so important. That active listening that we teach our students to do in classrooms is something we all have to model for each other.
And they're not just going to tell you stuff. Listening is watching as well. Listening is paying attention to what's happening in the hallways, in the workrooms, in the cafeteria. There are many messages being communicated in the school building. You just have to pay attention.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think it's pretty clear to everyone who is tapping into your podcast and specifically this episode that you are an administrator who has his eyes wide open and wants to know all the things and is ready to jump in and be a collaborative problem solver if that's what's needed. And so I really hope there's a lot of other administrators out there who go, "Ooh, I have a little work to do in this area. So I'm going to hang around, I'm going to follow Will, and I'm just going to do some modeling and see how it goes." Thank you for being you and bringing this podcast to the world. Amazing. Well, until the next episode where Will takes back over as host of his own show, I hope you all have an extraordinary time in your classrooms looking, observing, and listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much.